Good afternoon, everyone. TJ Alds, I-45 now. Welcome to another edition of Healthcare Unmasked, brought to you by UTMB Health. We're taking a kind of a different course on the show here today. We've usually talking about things dealing with some medical procedure, some health procedure out there. Now we're going to take where we combine the world of art and how it also combines in helping keep people healthy and in innovation for technology that's coming around in the health field. And joining us today on that is Dr. Aisen Caro Chacin. She is the lead of the prototyping lab at UTMB Health. And Dr. Chacin, thanks for coming on with us here today. This is going to be a fascinating subject. So I encourage our viewers to kind of stick around with us here because it may be a little bit different than what folks will expect us to talk about here. And in kind of the best way to kind of talk about that is because I guess the term is bioart that comes up with this a lot. And can you explain, just for the layman, what bioart is and how that plays a role in what we'll be talking about today?
Sure. Thank you. Hello, everybody. Thank you for tuning in. So bioart is a field within art that kind of started in the 80s. Dr. Joe Davis from MIT and Harvard genetically engineered an image onto an organism. And so that's where it kind of started. But it wasn't until 2000 when Eduardo Kac made a GFP bunny, which is a green fluorescence protein, inserted into a bunny's DNA with a group of scientists, that he coined the term bioart. So bioart essentially is the mixture between microbiology and biology in general and art, where we try to see yes, exactly. That's
I meant to prop it up a little bit sooner for it. That's the green bunny right there, correct?
Yes, that's it. Exactly. And so
we lost Dr. Chacin there.
Hello? Are you still there?
Back. There you are. You're back. Yeah, there you go. We lost your signal for a second.
Sorry. Yeah, I don't know what happened to my computer. But yeah, so that's the GFP bunny, and that's when the term bioart was coined. But bioart isn't just microbiology or genetics. It also has to do with anatomy and body art and understanding our physiology from a different perspective. And in a way is kind of an artistic and creative playground to understand where we're going as adaptable species and how we are now consciously evolving, essentially.
Is it a way to because a lot of times, we'll sit through many of these sessions with medical professionals and health professionals, and they'll go on and they'll show us the mathematics of something or anything else. And for anyone in the general public, their eyes start to roll and everything else. But when you're able to bring that visual aspect of something where it feels more real than it would have otherwise, is that part of this process as well, that it infuses a kind of a different, I say, fire off a part of our mind that it goes, oh, wow.
Yeah.
And then you're drawn into it. I mean, is that a
kind of wow factor is definitely part of art in general, I think. I think that it's not just a visual cue into kind of the science behind this bioart, or the science behind, our newest technology in genetic engineering and kind of, body modification in the sense of, implanting, implants and things like that. Really, it is a way to bring these topics to the general public and to have an open discussion about the possibilities. Because when we look at technology and it's only addressing problems to be solved, we forget that the technology has other cultural implications that, will come forth in the future. And so when art kind of takes hold of these new mediums and starts creating, people in art start creating, fun things like a glowing bunny, or, inserting a picture into DNA instead of trying to modify DNA for us to survive longer. We start opening the discussion in a different level and trying to see where we're really going in the future with this technology. What are the real possibilities? How far can we go? And where do we want to go? We start questioning the why and the how. And this is extremely important. And it's not merely utilitarian, it's existential. All these questions really are about, why are we in the world and what are we meant to do and where are we going?
Right. And it is we were looking at that, and that green bunny, the glowing green bunny. I was fascinated watching your video
Yeah.
presentation of this, that Eduardo Koch had created. So when some folks may look at that and say, "Oh, okay, well that's just a bunny that they painted green," but
Yeah.
that's not true. That they're actually looking at a microbiology, creation
Specimen.
of this, a
Yeah.
specimen of this. That's not, that's not a bunny there. It's, it is art. And I find it fascinating is how you can, it's folks like yourself who have this great artistic eye. I mean, I'm maybe two steps above stick figures if I'm getting it. But folks like yourselves will have an eye for the beauty in things or the artistic side of things as you're looking at them.
Yeah.
And in just talking about bio art, and you had talked about how that kind of makes us reflective to it, that the wow factor is part of it, but then it also pushes us to think things beyond what we may know. Does it not as well? Is that listen, you assume something can only be this way, but when you look at it from maybe this perspective, you realize there's other potential for
Yes,
this beyond what
exactly.
was there before.
Yeah, it's not only about, I think that sometimes we mistake art with beauty, but in reality, I consider art being more of a form of creating meaning, right? So making things meaningful, whether that's beautiful or whether it's just you know something else that put into a specific setting, it turns into something more meaningful. So for me, it's really important to have a well-rounded perspective about technology and how it impacts society and humanity, and how we are propelling towards the progress of humanity, because that's really what technology is. Technology are the tools and the methods for the progress of humanity. And so when you start trying to kind of understand that from not a utilitarian way, as like, where are we going, where are we progressing, but just kind of feel the aesthetics of it and feel where, how, in this suspension of like, okay, we are moving forward, kind of in a way, a more mindful approach, and perhaps even a philosophical approach, right, to technology. So
And when we come back, we're talking about the kind of the practical things of what you do at UTMB
yeah.
Health. I want to come back and we'll explore that some more here in just a little bit. For those of you just joining us here today, we're taking a bit of a different tack than what you may used to with our show here, and it's fascinating. It was fun watching Dr. Chacin, your your presentation video. There was the pop matrix part of things of technology that we're used to being used on us every day, but where it gets away from kind of the grays and the whites, and it makes it a little more colorful. Maybe a lack of term I would use, fun. But we're also going to talk about the practical uses in the prototype lab
Sure.
that you work in, where someone can really, when they have a vision of inventing something, of how it may come to. And we'll do that right after this from UTMB.
There's nothing more important than quality health care for you and your family. That's why UTMB Health is in the communities where you live, providing easy access to innovative care. At UTMB, we know our patients need personalized care to lead healthy and fulfilling lives, providing everything from primary care and specialty care to urgent care and emergency medicine. UTMB knows healthcare. UTMB knows you. To find a UTMB doctor near you, visit utmbhealth.com.
Welcome back to Healthcare Unmasked today, where we're talking about where art, health, and technology collide is our subject here today. And joining us is Dr. Aisen Caro Chacin. She is the lead of the prototype lab of fabric. I like to call it a fabrication lab.
Or makerspace. They're all interchangeable.
That's right. Yeah.
They're all interchangeable names for the same idea. But I like to call it prototyping lab because that's what it is that we do. We create prototypes. Sometimes, when we use different words, we kind of lose some of the meaning of what we actually do.
Right.
And so the MakerHealth space, this is an incredible place that we have at UTMB. It's actually the first makerspace inside of a hospital in the entire United States. And it was put in place in 2015 by a group of researchers from MIT, Anna Young and company. And they created MakerHealth Company, investigating kind of nurse making at the bedside. And so they went to Guatemala to try to see what nurses were doing in a low resource environment and how they were kind of doing workarounds. A lot of our healthcare practitioners will, especially in nursing, they'll know what I'm talking about when I say a workaround. And essentially it's, you have patients, they all have different needs. And so at some point you will have come up with a solution that is an alternative for that specific patient. And so this space is really a place for creativity and for the support of innovation within healthcare and at the bedside. So you'd think, okay, so as a medical device prototyper, I can just go in the hospital and come up with the problems and the solutions. But in reality, it is the nurses and the medical practitioners that are in that environment that have the right answers. It's just that maybe they don't have the technical expertise to, translate their ideas into tangible prototypes. And so that's what we do there. I take their ideas and so often collaborate or facilitate. And so we create prototypes and then we go through a process of patenting and so on. But we also have a spirit of open source whenever is possible. For example, when we made a ventilator for the pandemic in the early 2020.
Yeah, talk about that, because I liken this story to those who are familiar with Apollo 13, of who watched the movie where they said, okay, we got to make air scrubbers here, and we've got to make it from what we have on the table because that's what they have up there. And essentially, that's what you did.
Yeah,
creating a ventilator. You said, okay, what do we have here? We're running out of ventilators, or may get low on ventilators. What do we have here to create a ventilator? So talk about that process, because again, it's that visualizing what can be from something that you wouldn't think would fit with that process.
Yeah, so that process was very much kind of in light of what we try to do at the space, and why art and design and the humanities are important to be incorporated in a science institution or in the innovation aspect of all I guess innovation facilities. And so we saw the impossible decision that was being made in Italy, where they were only ventilating people under 60 because they had a lack of ventilators. And so, as we saw this happening, Dr. Chris Zanner from UTMB and I came up with this need to crack how we're going to do it if we run out of ventilators. And so we were thinking that we were going to have short supplies, and so we must use as many supplies from the supply closet as possible. And so what we did is I have it here. So
great. I was about to ask you, still had it around there.
I have it. So here's this is an ambu bag, this purple device that you see here, and you manually bag it. And this is how you ventilate a patient inside of an ambulance manually. And so what we did is we took a blood pressure cuff, which is, what they measure your blood pressure with, and it inflates and creates pressure so that it can take a signal from your heartbeat. And so what we did is we took this and put it around it. And, in all of patient rooms, there's an air and a vacuum port. And so we use this device that we, obviously it would had a filter. And then we created this device with things that you would find in the lab, for example. It may seem complicated to some of you, but we try to use as many simple devices as possible to create this, a simple electronic components. And so it has two valves here, and one of them is to inflate and the other one deflates. And so the reason why we needed to use the vacuum is so that it would deflate very quickly, and we could use the we could actually get to the right breaths per minute that we needed. And so actually the device is automated assist control. And so you can use it in both of those settings. So if the patient is still breathing, we have a small pressure sensor, and so it can understand when the patient's trying to take a breath, and so it helps the patient pushing another breath onto them, or it could breathe automatically for the patient.
And we're
And
taking a
so,
look at the kind of the full setup as it
yeah,
together. And so again, you know, for those who are laymen not understand, I mean, they just took what you had available to you to do that. Was this actually used on any? Did it have to be used on any patients within UTMB during
well,
that time?
fortunately, and this is what we were hoping, that we didn't have to use it. So fortunately, we haven't used it. We are still prototyping it, and we're going through. We're going to do some animal testing trials. So we will have some sheep tested. We're still working on incorporating some new components that we at the beginning hadn't included, because we thought, okay, it's the pandemic, we can't be making anything fancy. We're just making something, you know,
Right.
with what we have. But now that we are, you know, that we've seen that we're not going to need them, we have started to incorporate other electronic components to make it a safer device. And we're going to animal test it. We
And
have
that's
open
wonderful
source.
because I'm sorry to interrupt you, there, doctor, but it's wonderful in this because here was something you thought you may have needed. So let's go ahead and look at things because it may be a necessity.
Yes.
And which is a lot of great medical innovations, by the way, come during, either war zones or these pandemics or something like that. So you have this device here, but now it doesn't stop there. Oh, we didn't need it, and now we stop. You've taken that idea to the next step,
Yes.
and it's just fascinating, and to me, and I
Yeah.
hope to yours too.
Yeah, so what we've done is we created we have a provisional patent on it, which means it's kind of a process of patents where you have to 1 year to kind of develop your idea, and you can publish it and you can talk about it, but nobody can patent it because you've put on a provisional patent. And so when you let this provisional patent lapse after a year, you essentially open source the device. And so nobody can patent it ever again, unless, if you want to patent it, you must do it before that lapsing period of a year to fully patent the device. So we took a very conscious decision to not patent this device and close it. We wanted to make it open source so that in any case that we ever needed ventilators in the future, anyone could take kind of the recipe that we've shared through the patent and recreate it. And so, because it's an emergency device, we thought surely, and because of the circumstances of the pandemic, we thought that we better share and make this something that is good for everyone.
Yeah, and that's admirable. Like you said, but the fact that you, as I said, in what we were, thanks to our friends at khou.com, would actually come down and interviewed in the middle of the pandemic. Not came down, you had to do a remote interview, but showed this off at the time. That when you take that innovation, but this is not the only. This is the one we have the example of. Maybe the second. Talk about other areas in which someone has said, you know what, I think if we take this, and this, and
out of all of my
we can-
responsibilities,
sorry,
HACCP training and certification was one of my biggest headaches.
Sorry, as always, what happens with everybody, I'll hit the wrong button sometimes. But I was curious on where other cases in which someone has come up and said, you know what, I think we have an idea for something here. Can we, bring this forward? And what do you think here? Talk about some of the other things that have come through your lab that you've said, oh yeah, we can take this and become this at that part.
Yeah, so I mean that's not the only way of creating. So there we have a lot of creative processes in the lab. So we have created things out of thin air from necessity, that are designed specifically for a purpose. But the whole like kind of Frankensteining and what we call like hacking together something, I think this is the best example that we have at the lab. Other things that we do a lot of that are very artistic, I would say, are the surgery simulation models we make. Obviously, it's entirely sculpture. There's no other word to describe what that is, except that it has a utility, which is to help surgeons as residents or students to learn how to, do specific surgery. So the latest one that we've been working on was with Mia Benavides, who is a medical student, and she's been a fantastic collaborator, and we're creating a leg fasciotomy model. And so you can see the silicone and, a silicone leg with every single muscle of the leg that has been sculpted based on this anatomy app that she has to study in medical school. And we've bought a plastic bone and we've attached it and created all of the fascia layers and the fat and the skin, so that whenever somebody needs to learn how to do a leg fasciotomy, they can use this reusable model and have a tangible, learning experience with it. So other things that we do at the lab that are very interesting are we take CT scans and we 3D print them. This can be really helpful prior to surgery. I've worked with Dr. Marwan, a maxillofacial surgeon, who would print skulls before going into surgery and trying to kind of understand the fracture and learn the pieces and try to, mentally put them together through 3D software, or actually put them together through 3D software to kind of create a puzzle that he will have a memory of. So it's not the same to do a puzzle once than to do it 5 times. So obviously that cuts in surgery time. And another fascinating thing he was doing was molding the plaques before surgery onto the 3D models, so that he would have a lot more time in a lot less time in the operating room. Because if you can imagine that you have to mold something while your patient is, being opened, it'll take a lot longer, it could create, other complications because you have, you're in surgery longer. So obviously we want to cut surgery times and make things as safe as possible. So if he has the ability to mold the plaque onto a model of this patient's skull, it's a lot easier once that, the operation begins, for him to make small changes rather than create it from the beginning. Yeah, and I can keep talking. We have
please do, because I got to say, I know, the lab's been around since 2015, but just the innovation of that, and we have the tagline is that you're an artist who loves science and a scientist who loves art.
Yeah.
And I found that tagline to be so fascinating to me, because I think, most folks would see, all right, a scientist is very analytical and it's, it's this and this and this. And they'll say, well, an artist is all pretty in color. I mean, seriously, that's how the common thought is.
Yeah.
But I call it a superpower, because you're able to bring both together, where you're able to see, yes, you understand the science, you understand the technical side, but at the same time, you have that artistic ability to bring something to fruition, at least in a prototype form, of something that had, and I liken it to, I guess the closest I could for our common viewer out there, is that when you see your iPhone, there's a lot of great technology in there that a lot of Apple geeks made. But how it looks, there's some other geeks who are artistic geeks that come in, and it's form and function together. And that's the best way for me to kind of describe folks in the world who, whose only interaction with medical, that they'll see tubes and everything else and not realize that someone has thought about, how does this work? How does it function? How may it look different? And because more and more now, I think too, is that, and I wonder from a patient perspective of, while you focus on making these prototypes and all that, but in the long run, how a patient's perspective can change if something is less, I would say, scary or less clinical looking, when they're having to have a treatment. And I guess that's part of the goal here too, in some part.
Absolutely. I think that having a humanistic approach to medicine is actually necessary. I mean, we talk about care. Care is not a bunch of numbers, or equations. Care is also warmth, human touch, empathy, compassion. And that's actually a lot of what moves healthcare. And if you talk to our healthcare practitioners, we actually had a project that happened during the pandemic called Smiles Behind the Mask. It was a project that Michelle Millard, who is a nurse educator, and we collaborated with a community photographer, Violette Boulay. And one question we kept asking is, what is it that you hold on to when you're going through a difficult time at work? What are the thoughts that you embrace? And people really, some people responded from a very personal perspective, like I think of my dog or my family, etc. But most people, believe it or not, just want to help people. They feel fulfilled by being there for someone and caring for someone genuinely, not just, an IV here, put the medicine in this, turn this alarm off. It's the care and the life, and if you think of a hospital, it's a place where most of our lives begin and oftentimes where our lives end. And so it's a primordial place, and that is just completely filled of art and science. I mean, medicine is art and science. A surgery is essentially a sculptor. A surgeon is essentially a sculptor of the human body. And so when you start kind of extrapolating all of these barriers that we put in things to create, disciplines and separate things from one another, you start forgetting the unity and the kind of this unison by which, we go through life and understanding it and bettering it. And in this impetus that is boundless, which is to have a more vivid experience, whether it's through medicine or art or, even from talking yesterday, we were talking with the thought leaders from the NASA Space Houston or outer space, right? Everything kind of seeks to embrace this need for an ever more vivid experience of humanity. So at the end, it's all the same, and we do it all with love.
Yeah. So. I love hearing about that passion that you bring. That what brought, let me just ask you a personal note here. What brought, let me ask it this way. Did you start off wanting to be an artist, or did you start off wanting to be a scientist?
When I was a kid, I wanted all my friends and I to work together. So I thought, okay, we should all be teachers so we can all teach the subjects we like. Obviously, it makes perfect sense. I wanted to be a science teacher. But I was an artist. I've always been an artist. I've done art ever since I can remember, ceramics, etc. I studied sculpture at U of H, where I'm also an adjunct professor there. Yeah. And then I did a master's in design and technology at Parsons, which is an MFA, which is a master's of fine arts. And then I did so that's what I did at U of H. These are sculptures that are inspired on magnetic fields and the golden ratio, and using, you can also see I have a gallery in my freezer. It was the fourth one there.
Let me go down. I missed it. Yeah, here it is. There it is. This is the one. Yeah.
Yeah. So this was when I was young and I couldn't get a show anywhere. So I just made a gallery in my freezer, and it was the smallest, coolest white cube gallery space in Houston.
Out of necessity. I was going to ask you, and I was reading how this came about, and it is funny in some standpoints, but it's also a seriousness of how knowing as many artists as I do, and I would hope our viewers understand this, that you just want to create, like you said, bring smiles, bring emotions, and you'll find any place you can to do that. It can be in your freezer, it can be on a street corner, it can be in a gallery. Doesn't matter, as long as you can share that. with that. And it goes to what something you said earlier, which is that healthcare professionals, they want to heal people. They want it to make them feel better, and they will do whatever it takes to do so.
Yeah,
this is kind of the same concept to me.
Yeah, it is about people. It's about conversation. It's about pushing, boundaries and trying to, create experiences. We want to. Yeah. This was an art show that we created in my apartment. I turned my whole apartment into a gallery because when you're young, nobody wants to give you a show. You have to kind of make it your own. And so we called it My Birthday, and everybody changed their birthdays on Facebook and invited everyone to come. And we made a cake collage. And actually, that other piece is by Emily Sloan, and she put all these fans with feathers that were on a window, and which was covered with plastic, so this wouldn't go everywhere. But it looked like it was snowing.
Sure.
Yeah. So, it's about kind of knowing that reality is boundless and that you are able to move through life and express yourself freely, and that all of those things bring people together and, create conscious kind of, I guess, conscious community, right? Well, these are pieces of conversation. La Lengua Muerta was an exhibit that we did, which was about Latin American artists. And, I don't know, Latin is a dead language, right? So La Lengua Muerta means the dead language, and or tongue, really, like as in mother tongue, as in language. And so this is before Latinx and all of these new terms that we're using. And so we were trying to understand, this was essentially trying to give a survey of some Latin American artists that were living at the time. It was at La Botanica in Project Row Houses. And my work for that one was that piece down there that below, where you can see that there was a pattern on the floor. But anyway, that one. No, that one's the one I was telling you about, but that's okay.
So, no, which one should I go to?
Here? I was in the same.
Oh, I'm sorry. It was.
Yeah, here. If you go down a little bit.
Oh, I'm sorry. Let me go back here. We're going to go further down. So I'm hitting the wrong screen. There we go.
So as you see, the floor is kind of peeled off, and there are some tiles that are still intact. And what I did is I took the same pattern and kind of dragged it onto and painted it onto the floor, and I didn't complete it. But that was a piece about immigration and lines and borders, and as we walk and as we traverse through life, the borders change. And so when you cross, you assimilate, and you lose some of your identity and so on. So that's what that artwork was about in terms of like immigration. I guess it was of it more than 10 years ago where that show, I think it's like 13 years.
Right. Yeah. Well, I said we wanted to bring it up because I was noticing, as you said, a lot of the stuff you were showing is that, well, when I was young, I showed everywhere I could. When we talking about things that you do at UTMB, there'll be, the term I heard from you say the other day, assistive device art.
Yeah.
Talk more about that process so folks can understand that.
Assistive device art. So this kind of comes more from my master's when I started incorporating technology in art, because I thought that to make contemporary sculpture, it needs to move. I mean, the devices we care about, the things we care about are devices. And so I thought I needed to learn that. And so I started creating sensory substitution devices, and devices that kind of question our perception or kind of show different, phenomenology of our physiology. For example, listening through your teeth, or, being able to navigate space with sound through echolocation, etc. And so assistive device art is a framework by which to define and create art that mixes with assistive technology, that uses, cross-modal psychology, interactive art and design, and also psychophysics. So trying to understand perception in general. And so assistive device are, let's see. So an assistive technology that is very fashionable, for example, are a pair of glasses, right? They help us see, so they're in a way an assistive device. I mean, well, all technology is inherently assistive, but let's say, for the sake of the term assistive devices, a wheelchair, glasses, etc. All of these things, help us restore abilities, right? Or, better our abilities. But for me, it's really interesting how alternative physiologies perceive the world, and to understand that our mind is plastic and that we can kind of plug and play with it by learning and kind of adapting and gaining new sensibilities. And so for example, I created these echolocation headphones which allow sighted people to echolocate, because I was inspired by Daniel Kish, who's a man who echolocates because he can't see. And so he uses his tongue clicking to kind of get an impression of the environment. And so I was fascinated by this, but I was also very frustrated because I didn't have that ability. I wasn't able to just understand my environment based on the return of my tongue click. Because obviously that's something that you have to develop over time. And it takes, practicing a lot. And because I don't need it, obviously I can see. And so I don't need to use echolocation to navigate space. It would be very difficult for me to develop this sense or this sensibility. And so I created these goggles, which kind of have a speaker, so they essentially blind you, and they have this matrix of speakers, which are ultrasonic transducers. Yeah, there's
Yeah,
another.
no, I didn't know you had it in there. I was glad. I was sorry you started putting it on too.
Yeah.
Because what we were talking about. Sorry, and we've been having some technical issues. So I've been trying to pop these up. My forgiveness for me, folks, is that she has this great presentation with all this stuff she's talking about here, and we kept having it crash behind the scenes here. But
Oh, no.
I got that to work there. So
okay. Yeah. So I have some of the devices here. Actually, that one is right there.
that's it, off your shoulder there.
Yeah. But I've created different ones because actually my blind friend wore it and he's like, take those things off. It's, tripping me up. And I thought, well, I mean, you must know much better than I do. So I'll take them off. So the next few iterations, I took them off. But essentially it works by having two ultrasonic sound waves. And then one of them is a carrier wave, much like radio, right? We have a frequency, which is the radio wave. And then the other frequency on top of it is the audible sound wave, which is, Madonna or whatever it is you want to listen to on the radio. And so this has an ultrasonic sound wave, which is a carrier wave for an audible sound. And then it takes another ultrasonic sound wave to kind of demodulate. And so what it creates is a sound beam, almost like a laser. And so, light just lights up the room, but if you have a laser, you have a point of light that you can, maintain as a point so long as, as far as possible, right? And so this does the same. And what ends up happening is that the source of the sound ends up sounding as if it's where it's reflecting. And so instead of having it, be the source of sound like this, it sounds wherever you're looking at is where the sound is coming from. And so this technology made it really easy for me to learn how to echolocate and to understand space with sound, something that, Daniel Kish can do really well and I can't. So essentially it's an assistive device for me to understand a reality of somebody who has an alternative physiology. And I don't know if that's crazy. Well, but I can see your face.
I keep looking at it, and I keep about your friend who said take off those shields off the back there of coming on. But I can see it's the practicality of it too, where I can see it go beyond. Whereas is that it could assist someone who may be heart whose sight may not be as well. It has those potentials to go along the way. That includes, for example, one of the things that, you had in your presentation too, that I thought was kind of interesting, like the scent rhythm. This is one of the most awesomest smartwatches you'll ever come across here, where basically, it keeps time, but you're not looking at it to keep time. You're smelling it to sell.
Yes.
How does that work? It's fascinating.
Yeah. So in line with all the sensory substitution devices, where I was trying to kind of, sorry, my hair got all crazy after taking
you're right. We did the goggles.
But essentially, what I did was trying to understand what senses can we translate to one another. And, scent being a chemoreceptor, right, sense, where we are trying to understand chemicals with our nose, or with our olfactory bulb, really, it's chemical. And so I was thinking, okay, what other kind of senses are chemical? And I thought, okay, well, chronoception, the feeling of time passing, could that be chemical? Well, we have different neurotransmitters that kind of put us on time, like, um, if you drink some caffeine in the morning, you'll be awake. If you drink caffeine at night, you won't be sleepy anymore, even though, your body's producing melatonin and things like that to try to put you on time. And so this watch ended up becoming more of like a watch that puts you on time, rather than just passively give you a number that you can then correlate to time. And so it could also become a drug delivery watch, so if there was like a topical, or like a aerosol type of medication, it could be something that just kind of sprays, at the right time. And so I divided the day, philosophically, I divided the day into four quadrants, morning, afternoon, late afternoon, and evening. And so, and nighttime, I guess, evening and nighttime. And so, in the morning, it would smell like coffee, but it would also give you a little bit of caffeine. In the afternoon, I tried to make this the smell of money to like make you going. And so I got these scents of paper and tarnish, and then, give you something else to keep you going and awake. And then, when it was kind of time to wind down, it kind of smelled like whiskey, and maybe it had some gabapentin. I'm not sure. I didn't collaborate I didn't collaborate with a neuroscientist for this. But I would like, none of these projects are ever finished. That's how how it works. As we talked about, the ventilator,
Right.
You're still working on it. But anyway, so the idea was that it would kind of put you on time chemically as well.
And then you had started off our talk there being able to, listen to things through your teeth. This was one I think younger members of our audience would get into. It's a Playa Grill. This all comes around. We're not just having fun of it, is explaining how the design and concepts of technology can go to this. But as we have found with many things, you can do this and then find a practical use for it down the line. Talk about this here. It's a music player.
So yeah, I mean, all of these things are very much founded on science and a curiosity about our own physiology. So even though there are artistic kind of expressions of it, the root of them is always to better understand our bodies and our abilities, and how we are changing and kind of gathering new abilities as we progress as humans with technology, right? As we co-evolve with technology. And so the way that this works is that it uses bone conduction. And so bone conduction means that you can listen to something by bypassing your eardrum. And so you can listen, a motor and a speaker are essentially the same electrical component, except that a speaker has a membrane that will oscillate the air, that will then travel to your eardrum and then move your smaller inner ear bones to, create audible sound. But you can bypass it through your teeth by putting a motor that is oscillating at the same frequency of audible sound. And so I created this MP3 player that plays music through your teeth. And it was inspired by these rappers' grills, right? I always saw these grills and I thought, well, this is so bizarre. It's a fashion object that somehow is completely related to music, but it has nothing to do with music. And so I thought, how about I make this an MP3 player that actually plays music through your teeth to kind of bridge that gap between, this phenomena of tooth fashion and, actual music playing. And so, it was a wonderful kind of entryway as well for some rap culture to get more into science. And so this is something that can only happen with art, to mix worlds that seem so ever so different, and somehow this would seem random, but in reality everything kind of can come to full circle. And rap can inform science as much as science can inform rap. And so this is kind of one of these artworks that have deep cultural implications as well as scientific, evidence being shown in a way to kind of, disseminate science.
And so you have the educational component of this, obviously, from that, and maybe draws attention. The grill part was the one that and the I call them the bat goggles is what I call them, just echolocation. But the applications, I mean, like I was saying to you earlier, is that I start watching these and I go, and when folks say, oh, well, that's why are people spending their time on that? I liken it into sometimes fantasy becomes reality. If you think about it, the flip phone is just, the mobile phone is really we first saw it really used on Star Trek. It was Gene Roddenberry's idea of a communicator, and now it every phone, everything we have, the flip phones look more like that, but that's the same thing. To the technology now of taking a wand and putting it over someone and I can do your body readings. Nowadays, there's so much technology that you don't even have to touch the patient and find out what's going on, that our cell phones can keep and keep pattern of our heart rate because of a smartwatch and the like. Where do you see in either in the prototyping lab that you lead or in medical technology kind of more blending with art as we go down the line in the future?
So I consider all the work that I do at the lab or anywhere, art, because the way that I consider what I try to make, I consider things philosophically as well as practically. And that's kind of the theme of what we've been talking about here. So for me, what we do at the lab, is just an extension of my practice. And, imagining the future is a creative place. It's a place of playful integration with technology. It's a place of imagination. It's a place of what is possible, what ifs. And so that's the creative avenue by which we actually can imagine what progress looks like. And so if we're going to keep creating technology, we need to know what progress looks like. And art is kind of a fantastic place to continue imagining possible futures, or, to continue questioning the essence of life and where we want to go.
Yeah, because it goes into that earlier question we talked about. What do you seek to question in your work? You're not necessarily seeking answers. You're seeking questions.
Right. Yeah, exactly. I love to say that art is kind of a physical question, like it's just continue to open more and more questions, more and more doors, not necessarily for the sake of actually getting a hard and true answer like we do in science, which is incredibly important, but also just discovery for the sake of discovery, to be like, whoops, what did that do? Right. And then understand the humanistic and technological implications of those, new discoveries.
Well, you come a long way from having an art show in your refrigerator freezer.
I still think that's one of my best artworks.
Oh, I found it fascinating. I didn't know what it was. I thought it was at a gallery that you just said. Until you said it today's show. I didn't realize after looking through that the other day when you sent the link over. Oh, that's her freezer in her. I just like, oh, okay.
The coolest gallery you've ever seen, I promise.
I have a nephew of mine who's an art professor in San Antonio, and he comes up with stuff, and I go, huh. But then he has this other stuff that I just find fascinating, where he likes to do kind of this rustic art, and he made these hog feeders that are these weird looking things that they tumble when the hogs go and knock them around so they can knock the corn out. And that's the feeder,
Wow.
You have to work for it.
Yeah.
And we have photos of these things being in action. We have his artwork from there, and he's made these other devices. And when he first talks about it in concept, the common, rube in me will go, huh? What are you doing? To then when I see it, I go, that's one of the coolest things I've ever seen. And I wonder, because some of the stuff folks will see on this go, oh, that's so far out there. But at some point, it is things like, oh, wait a second. But if we do this, always asking the question, well, what could this do?
Right. Yeah.
And it is something I think along the lines that we'll see what's not maybe necessarily practical right now becomes practical in the medical field down the line. Because someone asked the question.
Yeah, it's about a spirit of trying to think deeply, and not just disregarding, or, oh, that's just fun, trying to think deeply is a well-rounded kind of place to be, where you're considering, deep questions that aren't necessarily utilitarian only. Right. Yeah. So,
well, Dr. Chase, you're right. We could talk about this a lot more. And do it again. I do want to take a chance to come and tour the lab with you one time.
Yes, absolutely.
And check it out and do that, because I think we'd have a fascinating time just kind of looking at all the technology.
Yes, I would love to do that. And then I can show you all the prototypes that we've been working on, and maybe bring on some of the students and medical practitioners that work there as well.
Yeah, let's make sure we do that, because I think it'll be a lot of fun. So, and if you want to find out more about the Maker Lab, you can Makerspace, I should say. We have a link on the site right now where you can take a look at that and find out more information about what they do and what and Dr. Chase and her team are doing over there. And at all times, it's fascinating stuff here today, and I appreciate it. I wish we had more time to spend with you. And coming on, and maybe you'll have some of the stuff coming up at the Earth Day celebration. Maybe if you innovate on something.
Yes, we will definitely be there. So come and see our prototypes. I would love to talk to all of you, and yes, please reach out.
That's coming up April 15th at UTMB's Moody Medical Library Plaza, where it normally is. It's nice to have that back in person again. So I think we'll see some of those coming up as well. And then also as something to tell folks is we are still in the month of March. It is, promoting promoting Women's History Month, and the series that's being done with UTMB, Women Providing Healing, Promoting Hope there. And Paula Stevens, the executive director of St. Vincent's House, will be the guest speaker. This is a virtual series happening on March 22nd at 12 noon. You can find out. We've put the link up for you on that now. So you can click onto that as well. Coming up, it's going to be again at noon. The lunch part of it's already taken care of, but you can participate through the online part. We'll put up a link for you as well. Dr. Chase, thanks so much for coming on with us today.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
And we enjoyed having your time on here. I was watching through your presentation. There was one where a guy basically put an ear on his arm on there too. And I go, well, okay, we'll explain all of this. So it's great. We'll have another chance for you to come back. And we'll
absolutely anytime. I would love to. Thank you so much, TJ, and thank you everybody for tuning in.
Thanks for coming on. Before we wrap up here, one final word from UTMB Health.
There's nothing more important than quality health care for you and your family. That's why UTMB Health is in the communities where you live, providing easy access to innovative care. At UTMB, we know our patients need personalized care to lead healthy and fulfilling lives, providing everything from primary care and specialty care to urgent care and emergency medicine. UTMB knows healthcare. UTMB knows you. To find a UTMB doctor near you, visit utmbhealth.com.